So today we're going to have a presentation on the discussion papers and public feedback to date on the new official plan. Just as a quick recap, as council will recall back in, I believe, November, I brought a staff report forward that introduced those discussion papers as part of phase 2 of the official plan project. At that point, council resolved to receive those discussion papers in order to inform future policy of the official plan. After that, we had some public consultations with some stakeholder focus groups, as well as public information sessions. And so we have the consultants here today from JL Richards and Associates to present the findings of that community feedback to date, as well as just provide a little bit more background on those discussion papers for council's consideration.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dave Wellwood. I'm a senior planner with JL Richards and Associates. And we have the pleasure of working with your staff to update, to create a new official plan, rather, for the township. So we'll talk a little bit about the work that we've done so far on the official plan. We'll talk about the background papers, as were mentioned earlier, and some of the key findings. And we'll talk about some of the public feedback we've received so far from those papers, and we'll go over some next steps and turn it over for discussion once we're done with the presentation. So we finished the initial background review stage. So we've undertaken a round of public engagement with residents and stakeholder groups. We've issued a consultation strategy and notice of the project's initiation. We've prepared 4 different background reports, which we'll go over the results of in this presentation. And we've done a technical review of the existing official plan to identify areas where updates are needed, mostly for conformity with the District of Muskoka official plan, as well as for consistency with the provincial planning statement. We've undertaken a jurisdictional review to look at best practices in official plans, and we've just finished our initial public engagement. So moving on to just click forward and we'll go over the next steps. So next we're going to take all the information we received in the kind of the background phases, and we're going to draft a policy directions report, and that's going to be prepared this spring. And we'll present it to you when it's done. It's essentially going to contain our recommended updates, specific updates to policies for the new official plan based on the work undertaken to date. Once that's done, we'll be drafting a new official plan, developing environmental impact study guidelines with our consultant team, which includes Hutchison Environmental Sciences. And we'll be preparing then for an open house later this summer. Once that's all done, we will be finalizing the official plan, which includes taking all the feedback received from the public and council to date, and preparing a final draft official plan and helping you prepare to adopt that document. Once it's adopted, it's submitted to the District of Muskoka for approval. And as part of this process, we are working closely with the district to minimize the amount of modifications that might be in that decision. So we've been working closely with them and adopting their feedback into the draft official plan. Moving on to the next slide. So we looked at a variety of different studies and reports that the township has undertaken in the past little while. So this includes your economic development strategic plan, your growth management strategy, your housing needs assessment, the new community improvement plan. And we've been working closely with staff just to understand some of the planning trends that are going on in the township. We've reviewed, as I mentioned, the district official plan, as well as the 2024 provincial planning statement. So it's a requirement of the Planning Act that your official plan conforms and is consistent with those documents. We've had a look at some of the other planning approaches from other area municipal official plans in the District of Muskoka to inform our best practices. We've also looked beyond Muskoka as well for certain issues. We'll go on to the next slide. So our key highlights from the background research, there's also 4 of these papers. There's one on climate change mitigation and adaptation, which includes strategies to promote things like green infrastructure, sustainable transportation, and other ways of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There's a paper on protecting the natural environment, which was prepared by our friends at Hutchison, which recommends essentially adopting a natural heritage system approach through mapping and policy guidelines for environmental impact studies. There's another paper also prepared by Hutchison on protecting shoreline water quality and ensuring sustainable shoreline development. And we also prepared a paper on managing future growth and development. I'll move on to the next slide, please. So some of the community input we've received, we've held several stakeholder focus groups with community residents and business owners. Some of the participants included developers and professional consultants such as planners. And we've also held groups with district and township staff. We've held a public information center, which was done via Zoom, recognizing that a lot of seasonal residents aren't maybe there during the winter months. And that was really well attended. There were several discussion polls and a general Q&A and discussion following the public information session. We also received several comments from the public via email, phone, and via the township's website. On to the next. So highlights from some of the background research. I'll go over the first, the next slide here. This goes in a little more detail on some of the reports. So the report on protecting the natural environment, it notes that the township is renowned for its natural beauty. These have the presence of all the recreational lakes, the forests, the rocky outcrops really make Lake of Bays a beautiful place to call home and highlight its importance as for tourism, for economic growth and development. Some of the key findings and recommendations, including adopting a more holistic approach to natural heritage protection, so creating a natural heritage system with updated mapping and strengthened policies, and also providing more specific direction for what should be included in an environmental impact study when that study is warranted. Moving on to the next, the report also addresses planning for natural hazards. And these include 4 specific types of hazards. So planning around steep slopes, planning around narrow water bodies, planning near flood-prone lands, and also planning to protect from wildland fire. Existing policy focuses on directing development away from these hazards to minimize harm and damage. So the key findings and recommendations here are to enhance and update measures to limit control of development within natural hazard zones. Moving on to the next slide. So what we heard from the public for these 2 reports was really the importance of protecting that natural charm that the township is known for, preserving public access, views and vistas to the environment. Examples include Dwight Beach, Dorset Bridge, Marsh's Falls. A number of other natural features were identified by the public. Promoting flexibility to accommodate development with appropriate mitigation of potential impact to natural heritage features and areas. Ensuring access to remote development, and something that came up, especially in the wake of some of the wildfires we've been seeing in California, was a concern with making sure our policies address the risk of wildland fire. So adopting fire smart standards and other best practices when considering remote development. People also mentioned that there's a real value in places that have a lack of development. So that undeveloped shoreline feel to a lot of lakes is really important to people. That untouched natural feel that seasonal and year-round residents appreciate. So really the need to balance between those the desire for economic development and businesses to be able to take advantage of the presence of the shorelines, but also protecting them for future generations and for those things that are important to people. And then people wanted clear policies to address redevelopment and additions to existing cottages within waterfront areas. Move on to the next slide. And regarding the report on shoreline development and water quality, the team completed a review of the current lake classification approach, and this was led by Hutchison. So current approach looks at lake classification, lake health monitoring and evaluation, and shoreline development standards. And the goal here is to look at how each approach has worked to protect the lake health and to see what the township could be doing differently. So key findings and recommendations are that the water quality in the Lake of Bays is excellent, but there's less data available for some of the other lakes in terms of the lake health. We recommend a holistic and conservative approach to lake management by implementing best management practices and continuing a science-based approach based on the district's lake health system program. Moving to the next slide, please. What we heard from the public was that that protecting that natural environment and protecting the excellent water quality is extremely important. So not just water quality, but clean air and healthy forests as well as clean water. The public really wants to prioritize strong policies to promote lake system health and preserve natural features for future generations. We also heard a desire for a balanced approach between untouched nature and environmentally and economically sustainable development. So things like tourism, commercial development, and housing are still very important. There's also, we heard a need for strong policies to encourage the preservation of natural shoreline vegetation and tools to implement and enforce best management practices. We also heard a lot about the need to address impacts of short-term rental accommodations in waterfront areas, but that also includes balancing the desire for the economic development related to having short-term rental accommodations. And then we heard also about the importance of preserving those natural shoreline features for their aesthetic and environmental values. Moving on to the next slide, please. So looking at climate change mitigation and adaptation, this refers to changes in weather patterns at both the local and regional level, including extreme weather events and increased climate variability. So really, when we look at climate change in an official plan, we're looking at mitigation. So that's your steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also adaptation, and recognizing that we are seeing changes and we need to adapt to those changes, whether it's more extreme risk to wildland fire or droughts or new invasive insects, those sorts of things. So the policies that are discussed in the paper and recommended include policies for green infrastructure. So things like parks and open spaces, the importance of street trees and urban forests, the recognition that natural heritage features and systems need to be protected, and policies to promote naturalized stormwater management. The policies should also support sustainable transportation options, which is a challenge in rural townships where there's not maybe a lot of public transportation options, but promoting walking, cycling, carpooling, the use of electric vehicles where appropriate through land use patterns that at least provide people with the option to use an alternative form of transportation when traveling to their destination. And then we heard about, the paper also notes how greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced from buildings. So looking at things like energy efficient building design and promoting renewable and alternative energy. Next slide, please. So what we heard was really support for balancing progress and tradition. Supporting green development standards with the opportunity for the township to lead by example when it considers its own projects, whether it's building a new arena or renovating township buildings. Those were all identified as the sorts of things where the public would like, the participants in the workshops would like to see the township lead by example. Flexibility in any policies that address climate change to balance the importance of housing affordability, promoting local businesses, and encouraging tourism with overall sustainability goals. There's a real interest in active transportation infrastructure that came out in the discussions, such as building networks to link up existing built-up communities with trails, with cycling routes for alternative road users. And there's also noted it was important to consider additional residential units in rural or built-up communities that offer a gentle way of promoting density in a way that avoids sprawl and makes efficient use of available municipal and private water and wastewater services. Next. The last paper was on managing future growth and development and adopting an economic development lens to official plan policies to support tourism, local businesses, and economic prosperity. So we looked at population demographic changes and projections. We looked at the economic development strategy, the community improvement plan, and also the recently completed housing needs assessment, and tried to align the report's findings or research with those documents. And really what the paper recommends is introducing flexibility for commercial uses outside of the core areas, village cores, whether it's commercial or businesses areas and existing built-up communities. Recommends putting forward a framework for identifying and protecting future employment lands for manufacturing, research and development, and warehousing, and other uses. Paper also recommends promoting a locally appropriate rural development outside of the built-up communities. So keeping in mind things such as rural lot standards, promoting agricultural uses, on-farm diversified uses, home industries and home occupations. Recommends standards for large and small scale resort development in waterfront areas to encourage economic and environmental sustainability. And considerations for refining community boundaries to better reflect land use needs and constraints to development. Moving on to the next slide, please. So what we heard was there's a real need to promote strong local and community services. It came up that participants wish to see enhanced municipal services in Baysville, where there's already existing water and wastewater systems. So really to see future growth and development build on that system and make the best use of it. Promoting access to recreation is very important to participants, such as parks, public beaches, waterfront areas, libraries, boat access points, outdoor rinks, trail systems, and community centers. Another theme was support for existing and future small business opportunities, the importance of placemaking and services needed by full-time residents. So things such as restaurants and grocery stores, coffee shops, health services being there year-round. Also, it was noted that there should be efforts to incentivize youth and young families in particular to allow workers to remain in Lake Bays. So there's a real focus and comments we've received on employment opportunities and also affordable and attainable housing for the people that work in the township. Also, it was noted that it's important to look at opportunities to support aging in place. So thinking about things such as secondary suites in rural areas and access to healthcare in built-up communities. Moving on to the next slide, please. So the next step, we're going to build on those recommendations and the feedback that we've heard so far from residents and business owners and other stakeholders, such as district and township staff. And we're going to put together a policy directions report, and we'll prepare that for you to have a look at over the coming months before the summer. We'll once we present that to you, we'll take your feedback and directions and revise it. We're also continuing efforts to engage with representatives of First Nations communities, and that's another thing that's ongoing right now. As part of the official plan, part of the requirements of the official plan are that it respect treaty rights and take into account the interests of Indigenous communities. So those are the things we're working on. On the next slide. So this is just kind of a summary of the next steps and where we are. How are we going to incorporate the public's feedback? So we've had stakeholder focus groups and public information session already. We are preparing that policy directions report, which will be presented to you in the spring, and preparing a draft official plan from there. We do plan on hosting an open house to share a draft official plan. I believe we have a date picked in August. And we will be incorporating community feedback into a final draft official plan after that open house to present a final version to you in the fall. Over to the next slide. So on that, thanks very much for listening. And Rebecca and I are happy to take any questions that you might have. Sorry once again for the technical glitches earlier in the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for that. First, I'll go to committee. The questions, comments, Councillor Papard.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, David. Generally speaking, because the district is also working on their official plan review, how do we balance that? For example, the natural heritage systems approach using mapping and policy, they're also developing something. Are we basically, eventually we'll have to follow what they say. So how are we dealing with that currently?
We are working closely with them to ensure that we understand where the draft, the status of the draft Muskoka official plan review is. So yeah, we've had several discussions with them to make sure that the draft we prepare for you to adopt is in conformity with that document. And we'll be having more discussions with them once we have a draft official plan. They'll have the opportunity to comment on it. So I anticipate once they comment on it, they'll be able to let us know if there's anything we're missing in the draft official plan required to be in conformity with the district OP.
And we could potentially adapt it if we saw the opportunity to adapt it a bit more.
Yeah, so depending on when they plan to adopt the district official plan, there could be a follow-up amendment to the township's official plan if there's items that the district is planning on addressing at a later stage, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Committee, further questions? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Glover. Appreciate the presentation today, David. My question is more about our role and just how we are participating as council. Like at this point, we're receiving information, and eventually we'll be discussing a draft, and then eventually approving a plan, which is awesome, and I understand that participation. But when I look at something like stakeholder focus groups, residents, business owners, developers, and consultants, district and township staff, and there's no mention of council, I'm wondering, is there any opportunity where you're going to be speaking to individuals of council or getting our views on some of these issues? How does that work? I mean, I've submitted something. I know there was a public consultation. I wasn't comfortable with that process, I'll be quite honest, because of the fact that I was having to sort of instantly come up with ideas and thoughts. And so I submitted something later. But I'm just trying to figure out if there's an opportunity where you will be talking to us as councillors individually or as a group about some of our ideas as well as the general public.
Absolutely. That's one of the things after each touch point with you is we're hoping to get your feedback on the different phases as they come up. So right now, we're presenting the results of phase 1. So we would appreciate any feedback you have. If you'd like to put it in writing and submit it to us, that would be fine. The same once we prepare a policy directions report, it'll be based on the feedback we've received in phase 1. And you'll have an opportunity to review and discuss again where if there's additional things you'd like to see addressed. Then after that, we'll have an opportunity to revise and create a final draft policy directions report, which includes your input. It works like that at each stage. At the end of once we have a draft official plan, we have an open house, we circulate that. You'll have an opportunity to provide input on that as well. So your input is important the whole way along. And definitely if you have comments you'd like to put in writing in the meantime, we'd appreciate receiving any feedback you have on the work that's been undertaken so far.
If I might add, and I'm not sure if my audio is coming through more clearly now.
Yeah, go ahead. Give it a try. Yeah.
Thank you. I do appreciate all of the feedback that members of council might have to guide us through this project, as Dave had mentioned. If there are opportunities, for example, at the public open houses that we'll be hosting in person for feedback at that stage, those will be more so informal sessions, drop-in kind of format to that, where if you have specific ideas that you'd like to see or directions that you'd like to see that you don't see reflected in the draft official plan, we'd be more than welcome to have any of those discussions at the open house stage. or as we come to council with periodic updates, as Dave had mentioned, through the policy directions report. We very much look forward to your direction and discussion at that stage before we dive into preparing the draft official plan.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor LaCroix.
Well, I have several questions, but I don't know if this is the place to ask them. I'm wondering whether or not I should submit some comments to them by email. It had to do with township boundaries, lot sizes, things like that.
Through your Mark Glover, you're welcome to ask them in this session
Yeah,
at that discussion or submit them in writing, whatever.
We set aside an hour. We're only in a half
Okay.
hour, so go ahead if
Yeah,
you've
for
got.
sure.
Certainly. Well, the first question I would have would be on the new township or the town boundaries that you're looking to expand in each of the communities. I can't speak for them all, but certainly for Baysville. I just wondered how you came up with what you did get and whether or not you were looking to expand what on the boundaries that you set up. I'm just wondering where you got the information on how to expand it.
Thanks very much for the question. Essentially, in discussions with township staff, there were some areas where the current boundaries were seen as not really making a whole lot of sense. They didn't follow lot lines. They included areas where maybe there really wasn't development potential because there was constraints to development, where there might have been other areas where we could switch them where there was more potential. We align them with features such as provincially significant wetlands and other natural heritage features to avoid those areas. The only place where there was discussion on potentially adding a surplus of lands is really around Baysville, where there may be a couple of properties that are very close to the settlement area where there could be potential for new growth. But we're not talking about significant changes to settlement area boundaries, just trying to make them look a little more rational.
Did you have specific addresses or
Well,
something? Now's the time to.
Okay, when I looked at your additional boundaries, I was wondering why, like Ferry Falls Road, there's 5 lots, new developments along that road farther to the south. And of course, when I look at when you look at the environment and you see all the homes that are on the riverside, I wondered why, the limits wouldn't be increased to try and, at least in the future, expand water and sewer down that road to capture all the sewage coming from these cottages that are along the river. Another area I thought might be expanded a little bit further is 117 East to Mary Roberts Road, I think it is, just because there's already, I think there's 2 large parcels of land in there and quite a bit of development already. It would only encompass another, I don't know, 500 meters or so, but I just wondered why you stopped or you did and not continued on in those 2 areas.
We could definitely have a look at those specific addresses. I definitely encourage you to put something in writing on that for us to consider. One of the things with expanding settlement area boundaries or changing them is that they need to conform with the District of Muskoka official plan. So right now, in order to change those boundaries at the district level, we would either need to work with them to accomplish that through the district OP review, or the municipality could initiate an amendment to the district OP. We've already had discussions with the district and they seem generally supportive of doing so. So if there's additional areas where maybe we didn't quite get it right, or you have some additional suggestions and where the boundary should be adjusted, I think we'd be happy to take that and discuss it with the district as part of our kind of pre-submission with them. I think in fact, I believe they're probably anticipating that we'll do so. So yes, thank you for the question, and we'll definitely be happy to look into that with district staff.
If I might also add to that, thanks for that, Dave. I would just like to to note that these settlement area boundary modifications or suggestions that we've put forward in the discussion papers do remain in draft. And we'll also be looking for community feedback on any of those modifications when we do get into later stages of hosting public open houses at that stage, so that we're able to incorporate not only your feedback, but also members of the community as we're preparing the draft official plan and continuing those discussions with district staff.
Well, thank you for that. I didn't catch everything you said, but I did get some of it. Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that, you know, when you increase boundaries, there's a lot of public consultation because, you know, you're putting them in the water and sewer area, which will increase their taxes and they have to pay extra for that. So, you know, it doesn't always, you know, you don't need 100%, but you certainly need the majority of people wanting that increase in development area. So thanks.
On the same subject, the Burnell Road off of 117, I know that I've had discussions with commissioner at the district, and there is plans to put sewer and water up Burnell Road. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, or, you know, you say you're working with the district, but I mean, they're saying in the next couple years, and basically the next term of council, we're expecting to see that kind of thing. Are you familiar with all that, or no, not yet?
I think we have heard from our discussions with the district that there were some plans in Baysville to expand the use of the system. I can't recall specific road names that came up. I don't know, April, do you recall in our discussion if that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Glover, that was one of the ones that was mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, did you have more, or are you okay for now? And to Councillor Anderson, there'll be lots of this talking. You don't have to worry about. You just jump in whenever you'd like, and I'll go back to you.
Sure. Well, I can ask one more. You looked at decreasing lot sizes to 1 hectare or 2.5 acres, which I think is a great idea. Now, one thing I didn't get into specifics, I'm assuming that if you're making smaller lots, the road frontage needed will be a lot smaller as well, whether that's 200, 300, whatever it would be. But I would just assume that the frontage would decrease since the lot sizes are decreasing, which would have a lot of lots.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think that's mostly something that will be done after the official plan review to make sure that the lot standards conform with the official plans. So once the official plan is in place, the township will be focusing on updating its development permit bylaw to conform with the official plan. And then I would suspect you're correct that would be when lots frontages would be reduced to conform with the OP.
Further, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to David. Good presentation. Thank you. In the one of the comments that you made was talking about environment and of course you talked about in particular transit. Obviously, we're not getting into public transit heavily, but I do like the idea of promoting bike lanes. And one of the instances that obviously in my ward and Michael's ward is Muskoka Road 8, and looking at in the redevelopment of that road, which is scheduled very shortly, meaning in the next couple of years, is to promote a bike lane from Muskoka Road 8, from Highway 60 to Camp Olympia. Because it is a hugely popular area for bicyclists, and again, this comes into economic development and tourism, and I'm hoping that you're going to be championing that for us with the district. And do you want to comment on that, or?
Sure. There's definitely the official plan will promote active transportation, and there's no reason we can't specifically mention, specific corridors where we want to see that happen. I don't know, April, if you have anything else on how the township feeds into the infrastructure planning proposals at the district level. I'm less aware of that.
To Mayor Glover, that's discussions that we can have with the district, but I agree with David that there's certain corridors that we want to identify in the official plan. We could take a look at that through the official plan review process.
I think one along there might be keeping the speed under 100K. At any rate, next, any further questions at this point? Not seeing it. Is there, oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just another point that I had picked up on was promoting locally appropriate rural development outside of built-up community zones. So I guess when we get into the next phase, if we're not successful in expanding community zones, this clause in itself should suggest that there is some flexibility there, or should be some flexibility there with promoting locally appropriate, if it's not quite, if it's adjacent to, for example.
Yeah, and I think our previous discussion about lot sizes in rural areas feeds into exactly the type of flexibility that we're hoping to promote. And also just looking at rural permitted land uses and making sure that they make sense and they're appropriate for Lincoln Bays.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Glover, and I appreciate this type of discussion and time for this kind of discussion is great. I'm looking at the shoreline development water quality section and their need for strong policies which encourage preservation of shoreline vegetation. What I just want to I put it in my notes to you guys, but I want to make it publicly a campaign for trying to increase vegetative buffers. So we're 15 now. The science says we should be 30 and our neighbors are 20. Like, why are we at 15? We should be promoting that. So I would really like to encourage that to be on the record. That's something that we could discuss.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to go. Is there anyone in the public wants to make comment? I'm sure there'll be more opportunity if you don't, but is anyone online? No? No? Okay, so that's it. Yeah, go ahead.
We'll just want to thank JL Richards and Associates, David and Rebecca, for coming today. Like they had mentioned, the next step is our policy directions report, which will come back to council. I just wanted to reiterate that there's plenty of opportunity for council, the public, stakeholders to provide input and comments through this process. You can do that through the township's website. We have a comment form on our official plan webpage, or you can also contact staff directly as well if you wish to submit those comments. There will also be additional public consultation. As mentioned a few times, we have an open house scheduled in the summer. There will be a very thorough circulation. It'll be released to the public, so we'll get that word out there to have more public engagement as well. But this essentially wraps up our phase 2, and moving on to phase 3, our policy directions report. If there's any other questions at this point, Mayor Glover.
So Anderson.
Yeah, thank you through you, Mayor. April, so in terms of the public consultation, that open house or in the summer, what does that look like? Is that going to be in person? Is that going to be a combination? Is that going to be at more than one location, or can you give me more information on that?
For sure, through you, Mayor Glover. We're having it in person, and we're aiming to have 2, one in Dwight and Baysville, just to be able to provide different days and different opportunities. We want to make sure that we can get as much engagement of the seasonal residents as well as the full-time residents and businesses. So we are trying to provide additional opportunities for flexibility there as well.
Okay, so no one with any questions in the gallery or here or online, so we'll move along. Okay, thank you very much for that, and we appreciate it and look forward to updates as we move along, and have yourself a good day.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and staff. Bye for now.